I've always thought that one of the values that the X Conference has brought just to the United States, let alone the world, is that Steve Bassett has a kind of a goal that governments need to tell the truth about what's happening with non-humans. And 30 years ago, you were in England over a period of at least 72 hours when a series of extraordinary lights and beams and perhaps a craft were in Rendlesham Forest in one of the most important NATO air bases that we had at the time. What do you think today, out of all of that happened, might leverage open governments to finally tell the truth?
Well, the fact that it happened in a military base, the fact that there were so many military people that witnessed it, the fact that they're all per se credible people that are trained to observe, and no matter whether or not the stories themselves are different, there could be a reason for that, you still have people on duty working that had something happen outside, like you said, the largest NATO attack fighter wing in the Air Force at the time, and it's, I believe it's clearly been established that something strange happened. So I mean, if they're not going to help us, the people that were out there defending England and NATO and the United States, who are they going to help?
And what would you like to see happen?
I think that first that we should all get together, because we need to sit down and talk about it and try to make sure we get a timeline straight and understand what happened to us. And then I think it should be presented to our government, because we were working, we were on duty, and there should be an investigation done, and it should be looked into what happened to us, what it was, how it happened, when it happened to us, and what are the ramifications for health and everything else.
Colonel Charles Halt was the deputy base commander, December 1980. He himself went on the record less than a year ago, finally, after 30 years, and he said, "I think that the lights and the beams that I encountered were," this is a quote, "extraterrestrial in origin." When you, because you were there, you're one of the few who were actually in the forest and had dramatic encounters close up with these lights. When you hear your former deputy base commander say extraterrestrial in origin, what is your reaction today?
Well, my reaction is I believe that it could be. I mean, the fact that what we saw happen is pretty much is very hard to explain. What it was able to do and what happened to us is hard to explain. So therefore, what do you have the point at? I mean, you know, the technology appeared to be something that we didn't have at the time or even have today, so that's a logical conclusion. But the fact is until we get disclosure from the government on what was going on out there, we're not going to know for sure what it was. And I don't think we should be going out doing our job and being on duty and not being told what happened to us, especially if they know.
And when you think back, because you were there the 26th, the 28th,
Mm-hmm.
and you are the only person that I know who had 2 encounters. I mean, what do you think at your gut level that you were reacting with?
Gut level, I'm not sure. I mean, it definitely was a technology that I've never seen, or I've never seen or saw anything like that prior, or before that or after that. So, I mean, gut level, I was like, again, I understand why he said it could be extraterrestrial or in nature. I mean, it could be from the future. It could be, some kind of time warp. I'm not sure. But I've always liked to leave it as I don't know. And to be honest with you, if our government knows, we need to know. It's not fair that we're out there, as General Williams said, good men doing our jobs, and then we're just left to hang after a traumatic experience with just deal with it. Too bad.
And we're talking about 1980 December, that 35 people were affected by lights, by beams, by a craft that interacted over a period of at least 72 hours and came back about 10 days later. And I look at this as an investigative reporter and I say, it is very clear that the UK and the American governments had a policy of denial. If it is in the interests of national security, and we are now 30 years later. What is it that higher authorities knew then that we don't know now? Why is it that John Burroughs and Jim Penniston and others who were there in that forest, they were asked to go out and investigate, they were doing their job, they encountered the incomprehensible, and there is no backup by either government. It fits into 60 years of cover-up by the FDR and the Truman administrations that said we have a policy of denial in the interest of national security, and that perhaps for the next 4 generations, which would be 100 years, no one ever is to know anything, and you will be penalized if you talk. Why would the governments in the 1940s have decided that they had to go at least 4 generations into the future, let's say 2047, before they would ever reveal the fact that we're not alone, that the universe has a lot of intelligence, and that it's interacting with this planet, and may have been interacting with this planet for centuries. And whatever happened at RAF Bentwaters is part of that phenomenon. And today in 2010, when people say, why don't the governments tell the truth? Why do we not have disclosure about something that it is very apparent that our governments have a great deal of knowledge about, but that there is a policy of denial? And I would say, as an investigative reporter, that gives me pause, and it makes me feel cautious. As Stephen Hawking said in April 2010, I think that the math says that there is a lot of other life in this universe, but you can't trust that all of the other life in the universe is going to be doing us humans a favor. Going forward from 2010 past the strange, controversial 2012, if we are finally introduced, we're not alone in the universe, I think that disclosure means simply that the governments of the earth finally acknowledge that we're not alone, that the churches acknowledge we're not alone, but that does not mean that we are going to have the answers to the agendas. Who are they? Why are they here? And why are they interacting with men in forests, humans in their homes, animals in pastures? Everything might have a reason related to survival, their survival and our survival. But until we know the facts, I would say that disclosure will come only carefully, and we will never get the whole story in the beginning. I've known you for quite a long time, and I know how much you have gone through that agony that a human mind goes through when they don't know what's happened to them, very genuinely. And I wonder if you could explain to kind of a general world audience, what have you personally experienced in terms of the problem sleeping? What do you know about Jim Penniston, Ed Cabansack, and the guys who were there?
Well, I can comment on myself and Jim, and there was a couple other guys that I've spoken to, and we've had some, what I call, I guess, nightmares where we were reliving in our minds some of what happened. But the hardest problem we're having is understanding what happened to us, you know, what we encountered, what we dealt with. Some of us have had some health issues that very well could be attributed to what we were exposed to. You have people making statements about what they saw happen to us, and we can't remember that. We're going out of our way to try to understand and make sense of what happened to us. Even from the very, very beginning, when we were out there that first night, when it was over and we were walking back, we both looked at each other like, what do we do? How do we explain this? What can we tell people? We can't understand it ourselves. How's anybody else going to understand it? And then to have the Air Force and whoever else is involved in this not even have the courtesy of taking us in and talking to us about it is just amazing to me.
And you and I know that people like Rick Bobo, who was up in the weapons storage area above the Bamwaters WSA that had nuclear weapons. He sees an extraordinarily huge object. He sees a small object go down into Rendlesham Forest, and I was shocked as a reporter to learn in 2010 that no one had ever debriefed him, ever. He was shocked that no one came to him to follow up on his own reports to Central Security Control about what he was seeing. What do you think is behind that kind of disconnect between you guys who are given military responsibility for guarding and securing a major military base and no one ever coming to talk to you?
Well, it appears, and I say appears because again no one's talked to us about it, but when you have something you can't explain, and I honestly believe that the local people that were involved, the immediate commanders, at least at the beginning, didn't know what we were dealing with and what was going on, was that you have something going on, you clearly state what has been said, that they believe we were credible and honest in what we saw and were reported, to include at the very beginning when the Halt memo was released, the Air Force said they stood by Colonel Halt's memo and that we had an unexplained event, that if they can't explain it, then they don't want us talking about it, because when you start talking about it and you can't explain it, that puts the burden of proof on the Air Force and whoever else is to either A, come clean and say they know what's going on, or B, that they don't know, and then you have the ramifications that they don't know what's going on when you're around a military base and you can't, obviously there's no way to defend what's going on, so there's going to be a problem one way or another. So even in Rick's cases, the more somebody talks to you about it, you bring credence and the effect of this is something did major happen, and then people want to talk more and more, and especially during that time frame they didn't want us talking about what was going on in Bentwaters and what we were doing there, because it would cause a huge issue in the problem.
Right, the nuclear weapons. And you're right, because silence in and of itself, no paper trail.
Right.
There's no one who can be brought before Congress. There's
Right.
no one who can be brought in the UK government.
Right.
There's nothing that can be done if there is silence.
Right.
But all of you, every single person I've talked to has said, why didn't anyone talk to us?
Right, and some of the people have claimed that they were brought in and interrogated, so, and I can't say whether they were or not, I don't remember being brought in. But again, I mean, back in the early 80s, it's a lot different than today. I mean, it wasn't openly talked about. The few papers and stuff that covered it made fun of it or made it look stupid. I'm not saying that some of them didn't take it serious, but it's just the way they did all of it. So therefore, even with us out there, when you can't explain something, what are you going to say? So we, as Jim has said, and I thought about this, and it's true, we even led some of it to holding back because we didn't immediately tell everybody what happened and how important it was. We didn't push for it ourselves as far as really hard, because we were younger airmen, and he was not a senior NCO but a junior NCO. So therefore, our leadership didn't question us and didn't push us on it, so therefore we backed off and left our leadership to make the decisions, and they did what they did. And as over the years we've had more health problems and nightmares and dreams, they still haven't stepped up and tried to help us or do anything for us.
And it was Colonel Halt himself who said that he thought the night of December 28th was going to kill his career.
Yeah, he clearly said in an interview, there goes my career, and Jim and I both did too. I mean, because when you're standing in front of everybody trying to explain something that at the time on the first night with Jim and I, there was only a few of us that saw it, was that how do you explain it? And when you see something that you've never seen before, you can't take and look at it and give an example of it. Most people are going to either be afraid of it, don't want to deal with it, or make fun of you, and you don't want that either. So.
And neither did Colonel Halt.
Right, and he was even in a harder position of being in command because of the fact that he was higher up, and if he couldn't explain it, and some people above him didn't seem to really get into it too heavily, then what was he going to do with it?
And believe it or not, the airmen who were there the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th, by the 29th and the 30th of December, to their complete and total disgust, they were hearing that somewhere from the, we'll call it the upper echelon of RAF Bentwaters and Woodbridge in England, that the explanation for what had happened to all these men in Rendlesham Forest was suddenly being leaked as a lighthouse only to the east. That's the Orford Lighthouse that everyone has heard about and had nothing to do with this. Or the planet Mars. And as one airman said to me, what do they think we are? Stupid? It was clearly a cover-up.
And then if you also, one of the biggest pieces of evidence that we have, it's there. I mean, I've heard people say he recorded it in his bathroom or something, but you have Colonel Halt's tape.
Yes.
And that's real.
It's 18 and a half minutes
Right.
of real,
And
over
if you-
7 hours.
And if you listen to him, you listen to them in the tape, and you hear him talk about when the object came over the top of him and beamed the beam of light down. What was he looking at? What was he thinking? And if you try to sit there and say he was hallucinating, how can you say that when he went on and became the base commander, went on and took over a very important base in Korea and Belgium, which all involved nuclear weapons, and then he finished his career working at the Pentagon for Dick Cheney. So here's a man that's out there that you've got a tape of it actually happening, and they're going to tell us it's a lighthouse, planets. Come on. I mean, what like that one airman said, what do you think, we're stupid?
So few people understand what you encountered. And I know that your mind is blocked to some degree. But can you try to explain what you and Jim at least were seeing on the 26th as you two were getting close to something?
Well, I've always said for me it was lights, but you could attribute it more to because of the effect on like our hair standing up and the feelings that we had that it had to have been some kind of energy. That's the best I can say. Jim has always said from the very beginning, no matter whether you want to argue about his drawings changed or whatever else, and if you look at Lieutenant Moran's statement, it was mechanical in nature. So he, from the very beginning, this is what they heard on the radio and everything else, that we encountered an object, and it was mechanical in nature.
And on January 2nd, 1981, because it's dated and signed, you made a statement and you made that drawing.
Right.
And we have tried to take a computer
Right.
and add color, but can you try to explain to a general world audience, even that drawing, when I look at it, it is truly alien?
Well, I mean, that's kind of when you get about disclosure and having them, talk about what they did afterwards and what they felt it was. I mean, you could call it alien, but I always say I've got an open mind to it. It could have been anything, only because of one reason. I can't tell you what an alien looks like. I've never, as far as I know, and obviously I had an experience, I've never been introduced to an alien, or been brought into a room and shown alien technology or anything else. So in my mind, and I think everybody's mind that was out there, is they have to lean towards something from the future, or or some kind of technology someplace else. But if you don't have anything to go back and look at it and compare it to, how can you? How can you sit there and say that it was aliens for sure?
Okay, and I really respect that, but can you describe, because it is an amazing illustration and you
Right.
drew it.
Right.
Try to describe in your mind's eye right now
Right.
what we have in the computer illustration.
Right.
You were there and you
Right.
drew that pencil drawing. Now
Right.
try to explain that extraordinary, whatever it was.
You can't explain it. You can't explain it because it overwhelmed you. We were all overwhelmed. I mean, we clearly were overwhelmed by it. We clearly couldn't relate to what it was. And that was just the best that I could do off of trying to, correlate in my mind what I experienced.
Colors.
It was red, blue, it was orange, a real bright orange, and it seems like the orange was an energy was the energy behind it.
And you talked about seeing a dynamic, that there would be one form that would have color, and then these blue lights would come out. Can you
Right.
explain from what you remember?
Sort of. I mean, the blue lights came out of it, but I mean, again, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. You can't relate to it, so therefore, I think people are having a hard time understanding. If you can't relate to it of being something that you've seen before, it's really hard now to come back and explain to anybody that has never seen what we've seen or dealt what we dealt with what it is, because there's, in your mind, when you see an aircraft, you can go back and go, this was an aircraft, this is what it deviated from or everything else, but whatever we encountered was something that I've never seen before, and to this day I've never seen exactly that, whatever was out there. And in your mind you sit there and try to draw on something, like whenever you draw something or anything, you try to base it off of something, and there was nothing to base it off of.
And you've got the blue lights in front of.
Right.
There's orange.
Right.
There's white.
Right.
There's kind of a orangish yellow.
Right.
And the blue lights seem to be out in front.
Right.
What do you remember is happening between all of those pieces?
Can't exactly tell you what happened. That's what we saw. And from over the 3-night period, the blue lights definitely were interacting with whatever the other part was. And if you just try to draw as best as you can, obviously the red type light was probably the main thing, and then the orange, white, and the white lights were based off of it with the blue lights. And again, I'm saying that as best as I can because I can't relate to anything that I've seen before.
And we know under hypnosis in October of 2008, when you became the most agitated, I mean you are terrified under hypnosis, it's because the blue lights are coming at you.
Right.
When you're sitting here conscious, do you remember any of that?
No, I don't. There's so much that it's so hard for, I think, all of us, that different people saw different things and had different perspectives, and when you hear that perspective, you can't remember that exactly as they said it happened, and your mind itself has trouble remembering it. So then when you go under, then more stuff comes out, which is totally amazing.
And in your case, you are the only person, the name John Burroughs. In my professional career, I started hearing back in '84, a guy named John Burroughs at Bentwaters either jumped on a craft or was taken up in a beam of light. That was the rumor all the way back then. Chuck DeCaro did the 5-part series for CNN. Chuck had heard this rumor.
Right.
You were like this huge mystery.
Right.
Was John Burroughs abducted in a beam of light at RAF Bentwaters with all of these knights and these people? Today, I mean, do you have any gut feeling about that?
Nope. I mean, as far as a gut feeling to me is something that you know is right. And today, to this day, I know what came out under hypnosis. I know what people have said, but in my mind, I still cannot tell you for sure what happened, other than we had an extraordinary experience that wasn't the lighthouse, it wasn't planets, it wasn't a meteor or a Soviet satellite, and that we experienced something that I think most people haven't experienced in their life. I'm not saying all people, but we experienced something that most people haven't experienced. And I'm one of the few that will sit there and say this. It very well could be ET in nature. It could be from the future. It could have been time travelers. There's a lot of stuff that's been discussed, but I don't know. And that bothers me as much as also the fact that what were we exposed to and why was it there? And most people don't even talk about it. But if something from the future or it was ET in nature would come back 3 nights in a row, why? What were they doing? What were they looking for? And what was going on?
What did they want?
And what did they want? Right. And what are the ramifications of it?
Now, Jim, who was with you the 26th, he has detailed memories of a craft.
Right.
Black, classy, symbols. Told me that when he put his fingers down in the grooves, he had a flood of information about these time travelers.
Right.
Jim Pennison will say, I know that John was only 15 or 20 feet from me at one point.
Right.
And Jim says, but I don't know what happened, Linda. He was gone. A whole 45 minutes is gone.
Right.
Is it possible that both of you could have been abducted?
I mean, anything's possible, and I mean, it clearly was when we got close to something that the light became overwhelming, and it blinded us. So I don't understand the physics of time slowing down. And what I mean by this, not that I don't understand it at all, but I can't sit there and quote you exactly what it would be like to be when time was slowing down, or if you disappeared. And I don't know if anybody can totally do that. So therefore, again, what happened to us? And how is our government, the British government, and everyone else come back and know that something happened to us? It was clear that someone from Ramstein came in, a 4-star came in, they took all this evidence, they gathered all this stuff, and how could they turn around and just blow it off? I don't believe they did, but how could they also just leave us there hanging out to dry, trying to explain, what it was and what happened to us and everything else? It's unfathomable to me that we would be treated that way. And that people across this country that have had stuff that's clearly happened to them to this day would be left out there. What kind of government do we have? What kind of leadership do we have? To me, as a leader, you're supposed to stand up because you've been elected to take care of people. You've been put in charge. And what kind of responsibilities are they not doing? For what? National security? How is it national security if there are people out there doing their job and they're confronted by something and you won't do anything for them? Well, what kind of country is that? What kind of leadership is that? And to me, that goes right to the top.
Right. And following right up on that is a discussion that John Burroughs and I had with Colonel Holt in the year 2010, in which Colonel Holt told us that he had conversation with a man who worked in the National Security Agency about Bentwaters. And that when the conversation started, the NSA man was saying that he didn't know anything about Bentwaters. And Colonel Holt said as the conversation unfolded, it was very clear that the man in the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, outside of Washington, D.C., knew everything about RAF Bentwaters. If the National Security Agency of the United States has more information than the deputy base commander who was there at RAF Bentwaters in December 1980, who was in fact in charge of everything that unfolded at RAF Bentwaters in December of 1980. And why did they leave Colonel Holt and people like John Burroughs and Jim Penniston and others hanging out there to dry? That's what we're trying to find out, and that is a part of disclosure in 2010.